We've already learned how to make successful presentations in face-to-face settings. If you recall, Unit 2, Module 3 of this course addressed presentation skills. This is Unit 5, Module 3. Here we look at skills required to make effective online presentations. Needless to say, this module must be considered as part 2 of the previous module on presentation skills, because many features we discussed as part of face-to-face presentations are essential features of online presentations too. Online presentations are presentations we make via video conferencing tools such as Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, etc. Unarguably, COVID made us all experts in online communication. We are all now proficient, well, more or less, in sending and receiving messages and information or communicating using digital tools. However, the biggest criticism that digital communication faces, and from the perspective of this module, online presentations face, is that they lack the human touch. We'll see what this means. By exploring the barriers of video conferencing tools, we'll also examine options to make online presentations better. So what's it that we can do in face-to-face presentations that we can't in online presentations? I can only think of two things: eye contact and body language to a certain extent. We've seen in the module on presentation skills how these can be used to our advantage when making face-to-face presentations. Though much debated, many studies agree that perhaps a little more than 50% of a message is relayed through nonverbal elements such as gestures, postures, tone, and facial expressions. This nonverbal communication of ideas, feelings, or thoughts helps a presenter develop stronger relations with their audience. How do we make up for the absence of eye contact and body language when we have to deliver a presentation using online tools? How do we make online presentations as effective as face-to-face ones when all we have are a mic, camera, keyboard, and a screen to communicate? In this module, you will learn how to make effective online presentations. You will learn how to make the text of your presentations more interactive. You will also understand the significant roles played by voice, gestures, and facial expressions in online presentations. You will learn a few techniques to ensure audience engagement. Detailed objectives of this module are listed in Unit 5, Module 3, Worksheet 3. Please download Worksheet 3. It's available along with the script. The worksheet has tasks and other activities that will help you learn how to make effective online presentations. So here we go. A presenter using synchronous communication tools like Google Meet, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or any similar has 3 options to ensure message reception: speak, write, and use multimodal aids. This module is a sort of record of some of the best practices I've witnessed while attending and making successful presentations. One thing I've noticed all good presenters do is, as soon as they join a meeting, they turn on their cameras and greet their participants. So remember this: as you join a meeting, turn on your camera and mic, greet your audience, and post the greeting also in the chat box. The chat box is an advantage of online presentations. What we speak can also be posed as written conversations in the chat box, offering our spoken words more permanence. Check the number of participants present. While waiting for the rest to join, pose a fun question or an icebreaker. Here are a few. Share an image and ask a question. Also put the question in the chat box. Take a look at some options given here. Many successful online presenters start with a question that requires the audience to respond in the chat box. Vary your questions depending on how well you know your audience. Questions like, where are you all from? I actually got this idea from Ron Beghetto. What did you all have for breakfast today? Or what would you be doing if not this? Or a truth and a lie about you. Such questions make for good icebreaker questions. Use your imagination, search news channels, troll through the internet, and create an interesting icebreaker or an unusual sign-in activity. Ask your audience anything so they are busy right from the beginning. Lapses in listeners' attention can occur right from the first minute of the presentation. Learn 3.1 on worksheet 3 has sample icebreaker questions we just discussed. Sometimes you might have to start with a response yourself. I call this a pipping response, like the breaking of the eggshell that helps hatching. One or two responses from the speaker I have seen encourage more and swift responses from the audience. Pipping responses also makes your listeners consider you as one of them. When you start your talk, you can link this icebreaker with your talk. However, this isn't necessary. The icebreaker can also be a standalone activity. Once you've managed to ease your listeners or loosen them up, we need to continue delivering this online human touch through the rest of our presentation. Let's see how we can do this. To make a long body of the presentation less boring and more interactive, intersperse it with the following listener-friendly techniques. Technique 1 is use of question tags. Beautiful day, isn't it? Or smoking kills, doesn't it? The second technique is using questions. Questions such as, what do you think? Or why am I saying this? Or how many of you think this is wrong? Questions have a habit of making the audience form a response in their heads. This means they are already answering your questions in their minds. Do you agree? This means they are actively participating in your presentation. Here are two other techniques to make your presentation listener friendly. Technique 3, a generous use of sequence markers or signposts, and technique 4 is use of describing words. Madhumita has already discussed connectors in Unit 1, Module 2, so I won't spend too much time on it here. Suffice to say that during reading, we frequently stop and find our bearings using the table of contents, index, headings, subheadings, page numbers, appendices, etc. And in the absence of these in speaking, we need to add a little advanced organizer to help our listeners make connections between what has been told to them and what's going to be told to them, and add little markers to help our listeners form links among different parts of the presentation. I would like to discuss the effect of describing words in detail here. You can build a word picture by using words that involve all the 5 senses. Describing how something affects all 5 senses can help your listeners form clear mental images. This way, you can tell stories that leave a lasting impression. And that's the difference between a table and a large, round, green, tottering table, or a Chinese meal and a much awaited, tummy-turning, dragon-fire-hot, garlic-laden Chinese meal. Here are 2 more techniques to make your presentations listener-friendly. Vary the type and length of sentences and using audience participation techniques. Take a look at this text. I'm clear enough in the head, he thought. Too clear. I'm as clear as the stars that are my brothers. Still I must sleep. They sleep, and the moon and the sun sleep, and even the ocean sleeps sometimes on certain days when there is no current and a flat calm. This example is from a master storyteller, someone who had perfected the craft of writing, Hemingway. Look at the sentences: long, short, long, short, long, and so on. Varying the length of your sentences relieves the boredom and monotony of a long presentation. The second technique ensures your audience doesn't doze off or start scrolling through their phones midway through your presentation. Keeping your audience's attention on your presentation requires high levels of audience interaction and participation. Ensuring this while presenting online is a huge task. Asking them questions and requesting them to answer by raising their hands, or asking them to turn on the mics and clap their hands, or make some noise, or type in some response to something that you asked, are some ways to engage the audience. Something I would like to mention here is that these techniques are not restricted to online presentations only. Engaging your audience interaction is a sure shot way to make successful presentations online or face-to-face. Please go to Learn 3.2 for a quick summary of our discussion so far. Under Learn 3.3, you will find additional resources to consult for some of these techniques we've discussed. The idea behind the use of interactive techniques is to make your presentation sound like a story. Then, even if you want to read out from your notes, you will sound like you're talking to your audience. Here is one way of modifying a text to make it an interactive sounding presentation. The original text is on the left and the interactive version is given on the right. Can you identify some of the interactive techniques used here? Let's take a look. The project is called Earths. Any guesses? This is an audience interactive question. And then the speaker goes on to say it's a huge mammoth shiny steel installation. Here the presenter uses descriptive words to help us build a mental image of Earth's black box. Further down, the speaker says, and how will they be powered? This is the use of a rhetoric question because the speaker goes on to answer the question themselves. In the next part of the presentation, the speaker says, now each of these hard drives will document and preserve a steady stream of real-time scientific updates and also analyze some of the gloomiest issues we face today, perhaps all of world's problems. Here is a long sentence followed by a short sentence. Moving on, we're all too familiar with some of these, aren't we? And this is a question tag. Further down, the speaker says, can any of you think of something that affects your region? Or what you think is the most severe of these global problems? Please put that in the chat box. This is a good activity to encourage audience interaction. The speaker types one response. This is how you pip responses. You are now ready for task 3.4. So you now have a smashing super interactive presentation text ready. So how do we deliver it? The first thing to ensure, like in face-to-face presentations, is eye contact. Here your camera is your eye contact. Keep your camera always on. Though much maligned and labeled Zoom fatigue, it makes sense for the speaker to keep the camera on. 1. It gives the semblance of eye contact. 2. This is the only way we can send non-verbal signals. As much as possible, speak looking at your webcam. Do this even when sharing screen. Participants listen better when they can see your face. They feel you're there. This is eye contact too. There are experts talking about the right angle, but here I would like to stress the importance of camera at eye level or slightly higher than eye level. I've tried all other angles and noticed that with all other angles, I look like either peering into the screen, looking up my nose, looking down my nose, and most times end with a pain in my neck. If you can accomplish it without much disruption, try to alter your camera angle when there's a break in your presentation. Stand for a while. It helps when you are in for a long presentation. It especially helps your listeners with a change in scenery. Go to Learn 3.5 to understand camera angles better. Secondly, take a quick look at your background and yourself before you join the meeting. Choose the objects in your background wisely. I once watched Professor Marshall making a presentation with a ubiquitous green plant on one side and a poster on the topic of her talk on the other side. She started her talk by connecting both. Learn 3.5 has a link to Professor Marshall's talk. Take a look. After ensuring how we appear, we need to pay attention to what we deliver. While delivering the presentation, remember to chunk the text of your presentation. This is important for both online and face-to-face presentations, but more so for online presentations. Convert your long talk into short segments of 7 to 10 minutes duration. Speak for about 10 minutes and then take a break. Give a 1-minute breather. You can use this time to clear doubts, sum up what's done, provide information of what's coming up next, ask for listeners' opinion, seek ideas, anything that moves the listener away from the drone of the main talk. Here are a few phrases you can use for these functions. Coming up next is a possible model for creating amplified conference presentations. Before that, let's take a short break. Does anyone have any questions? However, many times we see the best of speakers failing in their attempts to make an invisible group interact. Most questions we pose to online listeners go unanswered. This is when we as online presenters ask, "Can you hear me? Is my voice clear?" etc. In face-to-face context, there's a sense of obligation we have towards eye contact. When someone asks a question, we feel committed to respond. I'm told that eye contact actually forces one to talk. How do we ensure that everyone participates in the absence of eye contact in virtual environments? Personalization is the key. In face-to-face presentations, nonverbal cues play a crucial role in recognizing listeners' participation. Listeners' body language can tell us of attentiveness, confusion, surprise, politeness, skepticism, agreement, disagreement, boredom, etc. In face-to-face presentations, we interpret listeners' body language like a raised eyebrow as an expression of surprise, tapping of foot to indicate impatience, yawning to show boredom, a wrinkled forehead as doubt, or one raised eyebrow as questioning. But how do we enable this while presenting using digital tools? During online presentations too, we need to allow our listeners to express their emotions or provide their feedback. Remember the concept of back channeling we introduced to you in Unit 1, Module 3? We need to give space for back channeling during online presentations. We are also familiar with tools like Twitter, Kahoot, Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, etc. Tools such as these and others like GoSoapbox or Backchannel Chat allow listeners to give their feedback using words or emoticons. Interactions can vary from opinion polls, comprehension checks, brainstorming, to listeners posting comments, doubts, or questions. Learn 3.6 in the worksheet lists these tools for you. Many conferences now encourage their audiences to tweet their responses and reactions to presentations. There's a link to a video I've shared in Learn 3.6 that explains how Twitter was used as a back-channeling tool during a lecture. While using digital tools for back-channeling too, you might have to start with a few pipping responses. The idea is to give the listeners a reason to interact, an opportunity where they feel their voices matter. So while the audience is reacting, what do? While working on such apps or tools outside the video conferencing tool, remember to screen share the tool tab occasionally so the whole audience can see the growing responses. Comment on a few responses posted whenever you take a minute's break between your presentation chunks. This will drive home the point that your listeners matter. This, I feel, is the second biggest advantage of online presentations. You can show that all voices matter and that everyone is heard. We've so far looked at how camera angles, chunking, and use of interactive pauses can make your presentation delivery lively and more engaging. A fourth significant factor that can guarantee an effective online presentation is the clever use of your voice. We've mentioned this in the module on presentation skills, and I would like to mention it again here. I repeat the use of voice in this module since in online presentations, our voice has a more significant role to play. What we can't do in the absence of body language can be done by modulating our voice. High, low, quick, slow, rising, falling, whispering, whining, yelling, booming, trembling, or sighing. Try the entire gamut to capture all emotions. Vary the pace, pitch and volume of your delivery. Adjust your voice to capture topics, emphasize meanings and feelings. Practice conveying enthusiasm with voice, energy in our voice and self-assurance through our voice. Learn how to inject theatrics into your voice. Just like vocal delivery and special effects, silence is also an important element of sound. Use the compelling power of pause to drive home a significant point, to give your audience time to think, or to announce that an important point is coming up next. You can also use pauses to let the audience complete your sentence, to mark a comma or for emphasis. While creating your presentation outline, mark important ideas in your notes and plan a pause around them. Take a look at our earlier example. Let's understand what pauses do here. The project is called Earths and the speaker pauses. This pause encourages the listeners to complete the sentence. The speaker goes on to ask, any guesses, and pause again. The pause after a question here expects the listeners to form an answer in their minds. Further down, and how will they be powered, and the speaker pauses. Once again, a pause after a question helps the listeners to form an answer in their minds. And then here, all of world's problems could be analyzed, and the speaker pauses. A very dramatic pause here that gives the listeners time to think. Towards the end of the text, the presenter says, please put it in the chat box, and pauses again. Here the pause is to encourage audience interaction. In online contexts, it's safe to pause for about 2 to 5 seconds while delivering your talk. Learn 3.7 has some additional information on types and uses of pauses. Please complete task 3.8. This will help you learn how to create interactive presentation texts. Like voice, I would like to repeat the use of gestures in this module. During online presentations, what our listeners see is our head and shoulder. So how do we gesture with our head and shoulders? Theatrical voice needs to be accompanied by dramatic expressions. I understood the significance of drama when several schools across the world reported hiring theatre artists and drama coaches to train their teachers to take classes online. Teachers were all praises because ultimately all good teaching is good storytelling. The 2020 trend of mood calendars started by Reese Witherspoon is a hilarious inspiration to practice dramatic faces. Look at Learn 3.9. We may not be so theatrical, but that's a start. So practice smile, scowl, frown, laugh, looking aghast, love, surprise, hatred, all with your eyes, mouth and hands, so we don't look like talking heads. While our stance may not always be visible, hand gestures possible on camera include thumbs up, OK, snapping fingers, waving, etc. ScienceOfPeople.com reports that the least popular TED Talkers used an average of 272 hand gestures during the 18-minute talk, while the most popular TED Talkers used an average of 465 hand gestures. The link is shared in the worksheet under Learn 3.10. Read the article to know the various gestures you can use to communicate different shades of meaning. I could go on and on, but since we are running out of time, we need to end this here. So to summarize, in this module, we looked at various ways to make online presentations interactive, engaging, meaningful, and in short, successful. We looked at pre-seminar interactions, techniques to personalize the text of our presentations, use of camera, and the significance of gestures, voice, and facial expressions in online presentations. We also learnt of techniques like interactive pauses, chunking, and back channeling to ensure audience engagement. So go on. I hope you enjoyed the module. Please remember to complete task 3.11. Thank you for listening.